There are moments in life when God doesn't shout, He whispers. And sometimes that whisper is a command that shakes your entire world. Respect yourself and walk away. Not because you are weak, not because you are tired, but because God has decided it is time to protect the greatness He placed inside you. Some relationships, environments, and battles drain the dignity, identity, and destiny God gave you. And heaven will not allow you to stay where your spirit is slowly dying. There comes a divine moment when God says, enough. Move forward. I have more for you. The hidden power of letting go is not in what you leave. It's in what God is preparing to give you next. When God calls you to walk away in order to protect your identity, it is one of the most profound and challenging instructions you will ever receive. It is not a command rooted in anger or pride, but in divine wisdom. God sees the weight you carry, the quiet wounds you hide, and the silent compromises you've made just to keep certain relationships, environments, or habits alive. Sometimes you don't walk away because you're blind. You don't walk away because your heart is loyal. But loyalty becomes dangerous when it starts costing you the dignity God has placed inside you. God will not allow you to remain in a place where your identity is slowly being eroded, reshaped, or suffocated. So He interrupts your life with a whisper that feels heavy and holy at the same time. Respect yourself and walk away. Identity is heaven's signature on your life. It is the blueprint of who you were designed to become. Everything God has prepared for you is connected to your identity, and the enemy knows this. This is why the attack against you is rarely physical. It is almost always an attack on your perception of yourself. When people belittle you, ignore your value, or treat you as if you are disposable, the goal is not just to wound you emotionally. The deeper aim is to make you forget who you are. The enemy doesn't mind you going to church, praying, or reading scripture as long as you remain unsure, insecure, or unaware of the greatness God deposited within you. Because an insecure believer is a powerless believer. A believer who has forgotten their identity easily tolerates disrespect, accepts limitations, and settles for places God never assigned them to. That is why God steps in. He knows that your environment can shape your character more than your intentions do. Staying where you are not valued slowly convinces you that you are not valuable. And God refuses to let His children live beneath their identity. So He calls you to walk away, not because you are too good for the place, but because the place is too small for your calling. You were not created to shrink to fit someone else's limited vision of you. You were created to expand into the fullness of who God designed you to become. Walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. It means you have finally recognized the difference between being humble and being diminished. Humility is agreeing with God about who you are. Diminishment is agreeing with people who don't see your worth. God is not asking you to walk away to punish anyone. He is asking you to walk away so He can reposition you. As long as you remain in the wrong environment, you cannot hear the right instructions. As long as you are surrounded by voices that disrespect your identity, you cannot fully embrace your divine assignment. Walking away clears the noise so you can finally hear what God has been saying all along. Sometimes the hardest part is not the walking, it is the leaving emotionally. You may still feel attached to the history, the memories, the shared dreams, and the expectations. But history is not destiny. God is not calling you backward. He is calling you forward. When you walk away out of obedience, heaven begins to rebuild the confidence, the clarity, and the spiritual strength that was being drained from you. You begin to rediscover the truth about yourself, that you are loved, chosen, set apart, and crowned with purpose. That you are not an afterthought, but a divine intention. That you do not have to beg for respect because God already gave you worth. Walking away is also a declaration of spiritual boundaries. God gives you the permission to say no to environments that dishonor your calling. You are not called to be a doormat for anyone's insecurity. You are not called to tolerate emotional manipulation, disrespect, or relationships that exhaust your spirit. You are called to be a steward of your own soul. And stewardship means protecting what God has entrusted you with, including your identity. Sometimes you wait for God to remove people, but God is waiting for you to walk away. He will not force you. He will not drag you. He simply instructs you and waits for your obedience. Because spiritual maturity is proven in the decisions you make when your heart wants to stay, but your spirit knows it's time to go. When you obey that voice, the chains of fear break. The anxiety of loneliness is replaced with the peace of divine companionship. God never asks you to walk away and then leaves you empty. He asks you to walk away because He is already preparing a place, a season, a relationship, or an opportunity that aligns with your true identity. Respecting yourself is not ego. It is agreement with God. And agreement with God always demands action. Sometimes the action is to stay and grow. Sometimes the action is to fight and persevere. But there are sacred moments when the action God requires is simply to walk away. Because walking away is not about abandoning others. It is about returning to who you are. It is about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your God-given dignity. It is about standing tall in the identity heaven wrote over your life before you were even born. It is about choosing the future God planned for you instead of the past that is trying to hold you hostage. Letting go is one of the clearest signs of spiritual maturity because it demands a level of trust, surrender, and identity that cannot be faked. Anyone can hold on. Anyone can cling to what feels familiar. Anyone can fight to preserve what is already fading. But only a spiritually mature person can release something they once prayed for, something they once valued, something they once believed would last forever, simply because God said it is time to let go. Letting go is not the language of weak people. It is the language of people who have learned to trust God more than their emotions, more than their memories, more than their desires, and more than their own understanding. When God calls you to let go, it is not a punishment. It is a promotion. It is not rejection. It is redirection. It is not loss. It is transformation. And it takes maturity to recognize that. The truth is, spiritual growth is not measured by how much you gain, but by how much you're willing to release. Sometimes the weight that slows you down isn't something evil or toxic. Sometimes it is simply something that has expired. Not everyone who started with you is assigned to finish with you. Not every friendship that blessed you in one season is meant to accompany you into the next. Not every opportunity that once opened a door is still part of God's plan for your future. But letting go of what once helped you can feel painful, confusing, and even unfair. Yet it is in these moments that your faith is tested the most. Holding on requires strength. Letting go requires surrender. And surrender is the birthplace of spiritual maturity. When God asks you to release something, He already sees what you cannot. He sees where that path leads. He sees the limits of that connection. He sees the hidden dangers your heart is too emotional to notice. He sees the opportunities that would be blocked if you stayed attached to something that no longer aligns with your destiny. Letting go is God's way of preparing you for a future that requires your hands to be empty and your heart to be available. But because we are human, we often fight to keep what God is trying to remove, thinking we are protecting ourselves when in reality we are delaying our elevation. It takes maturity to say, Lord, I do not understand, but I trust you enough to release it. Maturity also teaches you that peace is more valuable than connection. When you are spiritually immature, you will cling to chaos simply because it feels familiar. You will hold on to relationships that harm you because you fear being alone. You will stay in environments that drain you because you worry about starting over. But when you grow in God, you realize that anything which costs you your peace is too expensive for your destiny. The closer you walk with God, the more allergic you become to unnecessary drama, confusion, disrespect, and spiritual clutter. You no longer need everything to make sense. You just need to sense God's presence. And when His presence begins to withdraw from something, maturity teaches you that it is time to let go. Letting go also reveals how deeply you trust the character of God. It is easy to trust God when He adds to your life. It is much harder to trust Him when He subtracts. But subtraction is often heaven's strategy for multiplication. God prunes the branch not to weaken it, but to make it more fruitful. In the same way, He removes what hinders your growth. He trims away attachments that are limiting your potential. He cuts off things you keep nurturing out of nostalgia rather than purpose. Spiritual maturity recognizes that when God takes something away, it is always an act of love. He is not trying to break you. He is trying to build you. He is not trying to empty you. He is trying to prepare space for something greater. You also learn through maturity that clinging to the past can suffocate your future. Many people never enter their promised land because they refuse to release their Egypt. They pray for new blessings while holding on to old burdens. They ask God to open new doors while their hands remain full of yesterday's failures and yesterday's successes. Spiritual maturity understands that the future God has designed cannot fit inside the smallness of your past. Letting go is not about losing something, it is about making room. God cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. He cannot place new promises into closed fists. He cannot reveal the next chapter to someone who refuses to turn the page. Another dimension of maturity is realizing that letting go is not the same as quitting. Quitting is surrendering to fear. Letting go is surrendering to God. Quitting is walking away because you are tired. Letting go is walking away because you are guided. Quitting is rooted in frustration. Letting go is rooted in revelation. Maturity helps you discern the difference. When God asks you to let go, He is not removing your assignment. He is refining it. He is shifting your posture. He is elevating your perspective. He is reminding you that obedience is more important than attachment, and purpose is more important than preference. Letting go also deepens your ability to love without being wounded by loss. Immature love clings, controls, and fears change. Mature love trusts, releases, and evolves. When you let go out of obedience, you are honoring God first, yourself second, and the other person third. You are refusing to allow resentment or regret to poison your heart. You are choosing healing over bitterness. You are choosing transformation over stagnation. You are choosing God's will over your own. And that choice is the very definition of spiritual maturity. Letting go makes room for the person you are becoming. The version of you that God is shaping needs more clarity, more peace, more courage, and more faith than the version of you that once held on to things that were not meant to stay. The old you needed those attachments. The new you is being strengthened by releasing them. Letting go is not just a moment. It is a milestone in your spiritual journey, a sign that you are growing, expanding, and becoming who God always intended you to be. Your future does not begin when circumstances change, when people apologize, or when opportunities open up. Your future begins the very moment you obey God's instruction to walk away from what no longer carries His presence. Every major turning point in Scripture happened at the moment of movement, when someone had the courage to step away from the familiar and walk toward the unknown. Walking away is not an escape, it is an entry. It is the doorway through which God ushers you into the next dimension of purpose, clarity, identity, and destiny. But the challenge is that the doorway rarely looks like a blessing at first. It often looks like loss, separation, discomfort, uncertainty, and even pain. Yet heaven sees it as the birth of a new chapter. The enemy knows that your next season is connected to your obedience. That's why he tries to keep you stuck. He uses fear to chain you to situations that no longer serve your calling. He uses nostalgia to keep you tied to places where you have already outgrown your assignment. He uses emotional attachment to anchor you in environments that limit you, diminish you, or distract you. But God whispers into the soul of those he is preparing it is time to walk away. And when you obey that whisper, you step into a future that was waiting for your courage. Walking away is an act of spiritual vision. It means you choose to trust what God sees over what your eyes can see. You choose to believe that beyond the door of obedience lies a land of promise, even if all you see right now is the hallway of uncertainty. People often want the miracle before they make the move, but God operates differently. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses stretched out his rod. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until the people walked around them. The widow's oil didn't multiply until she poured it out. Peter didn't walk on water until he stepped out of the boat. And your future won't fully unfold until you take that first step of faith and walk away from what God has told you to release. There is a spiritual law that many overlook. God never reveals the next until you honor him in the now. Some people cry out for a new season, yet they remain emotionally attached to the old one. They want God to bring fresh blessings while they are still holding on to expired relationships, expired habits, expired dreams, and expired mindsets. But God cannot elevate someone who refuses to exit what he has already closed. You can pray for change, but the change will not begin until you make a movement in obedience. Walking away also breaks cycles. Every negative cycle, whether emotional, relational, spiritual, or generational, requires someone to make a radical decision that enough is enough. You cannot step into generational blessing while remaining tied to generational patterns. God often calls you to walk away because he is using you as the transition point for an entire bloodline. You may think you are just leaving a relationship, a job, a place, or a habit, but in reality, you are breaking a cycle that has held your family for years. Your obedience becomes the seed of freedom that grows into a harvest future generations will benefit from. Walking away also reveals what God has been trying to give you all along. Sometimes God hides blessings behind decisions. He hides peace behind separation. He hides healing behind boundaries. He hides elevation behind obedience. There are doors that will never open for you until you leave the doors that have already closed. God will not force you out of a season. He invites you out. But that invitation requires trust. You cannot discover new identity while staying in old environments. You cannot see new horizons while holding on to old limitations. The future God has ordained is always bigger than the season he calls you to walk away from. Walking away is also a statement of faith to heaven and a threat to darkness. It tells the enemy, you no longer control my choices. It tells your past, you no longer define my future. It tells your heart, you are strong enough to heal. It tells your spirit, you are finally aligned with God. Many people underestimate the spiritual warfare connected to walking away. The enemy fights hardest when you're closest to a breakthrough. That internal battle you feel when God calls you to let go is not confusion. It is confirmation. It is a sign that something powerful is on the other side of your obedience. Your future begins when you walk away, because walking away restores your authority. It returns your voice. It awakens your identity. It reminds you of your value. It frees your capacity. It opens your eyes to possibilities you could not see when your vision was clouded by attachment. Sometimes you cannot see what God has for you until you walk away from what was blinding you. There are blessings that will only make sense when you look back and say, if I had stayed, I would have missed this. God never calls you out without preparing a place for you. He never asks you to release without planning to replace. He never tells you to walk away from something unless he is leading you towards something better, higher, holier, or more aligned with your destiny. People see what you're leaving, God sees where you're going. People see the separation, heaven sees the preparation. People see the distance, heaven sees the destiny. Your future does not start when things change around you. It starts when something shifts inside you. It begins when you choose obedience over comfort, faith over fear, movement over stagnation, and destiny over history. Walking away is not the end of your story. It is the moment the story truly begins. God will not reveal the next chapter until you close the old one with courage. Sometimes your destiny is waiting on one brave decision: respect yourself and walk away. Your future is too important. Your purpose is too valuable. Your identity is too precious. When God says walk away, He is announcing that something greater is coming, and the only thing you lose is what was never meant to stay.